All right, so that's really what this is. Now, who am I? Well, my name is Darren Kittleson. I'm coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin. I've got on the screen just how you can stay in touch with me from a social media perspective. Now, I wear a lot of hats within the Keller Williams world and also within the National Association of Realtors world. And so social media is a great way to kind of keep track of me because I love bringing great content to real estate agents that's timely. And so we do a lot on Twitter, on my Instagram page, my Facebook business page, and then also on YouTube. We're doing more and more content creation there. And I've got this kind of alphabet soup behind my name, and I only put that in there for one reason, and that is that last one, R-E-N-E. So I thought, well, what gives me credibility in having this conversation today? Well, first off, this is my 31st year in residential real estate. I do own 2 Keller Williams market centers in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm the broker for those. And so I've been doing that for about almost 20 years. Let's see, and then on the national level, I'm a Keller Williams University International Master Faculty member, so I train a lot of courses all over the world. I also get a chance to work as a BOLD coach, and I've done that now for 10 years. And then I also then teach a course called the Real Estate Negotiation Expert, which is one of the newest NAR certifications, and it's the only one that they recognize around negotiations. So it's a great course, 2-day course. A lot of times your local association will bring us in to train that. It's a certification course, so it's a take it once, complete it, and you're done. And it's deeper dive into what I'm going to touch on today. So that's why I wanted to put it up there. SRS is Seller Representative Specialist. That's kind of the flip side of the ABR. And that's a designation. And then CRB is Council of Real Estate Brokerage Managers, which is a designation as well. So lastly on this slide, just you might want to jot down my email address, because that's the way you can stay in touch with me. And here's how I look at things. If you take a course that I offer at any point in time, you're in my world and you have access to me. So if you've got a question, you've got a thought, you want to bounce an idea past me, the best way to get in touch with me is email first, and then we'll work to set up a time for a Zoom call, a phone call, whatever might be easiest for me to help you out. And that's just what I do because I love helping agents do better. So that's my goal. So that's really, that email is a great way to stay in touch with me. Now, when COVID really hit us in early March, none of us knew what the world was going to look like. And so we created a website right at the very beginning of March called kwpivot2020.com. And I just want to offer it out as a resource for anybody. We've got a lot of stuff there. We've got a lot of best practices, a lot of forms and best ways to do disclosures are offered up there. I also have a whole area around mindset, because I knew that one of the toughest things about this time, no matter how long it will be, and we still don't know how long it's going to last, is really managing this piece, that we could stay strong and stay upbeat and stay focused even with things challenging us each and every day. And that's from health issues with ourselves and our family members all the way through to how our buyers and sellers might react. So I've got some really cool mindset stuff there as well. And it's free. It's just a resource there for you. Now, this is a course about negotiation. I thought, well, as we jump in, we should probably define it. So this comes to us from the Business Dictionary. It says negotiation is bargaining, which is a give and take. It's a process between 2 or more parties, each with their own aims, needs, and viewpoints. Now, this is key, this each with their own aims, needs, and viewpoints, because I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as real estate agents is we think that there's really only 2 parties in a negotiation. There's a buyer and there's a seller. And the reality is there's actually everybody who's involved in the negotiation is a party to the negotiation in a way. Now, from the legal sense, the parties are the buyer and seller. Yet as an agent, you have aims, needs, and viewpoints during a negotiation. As the co-broke agent, they have aims, needs, and viewpoints during a negotiation. Sometimes if it's a first-time home buyer, like about a third of the market is for most of us, the parents show up and they have their own aims, needs, and viewpoints. And so in a negotiation, we want to discover common ground between those and reach agreement. So the key takeaway here is that we've got to understand that everybody involved in the negotiation has something at stake and they have their own outcomes that they would desire. So that's kind of a key piece to setting up the rest of this conversation. Now, within our company, Keller Williams, we have a belief system called the Y4C2Ts. It's an acronym, and it speaks to who we are. The very first letter of that acronym is W, and it stands for win-win or no deal. We believe the same thing in a really successful negotiation. And this is my first takeaway about negotiation in the time of COVID-19. You know, we're operating in a market right now where there's a lot of uncertainty. And there are things that could change daily based on what's happening in your local market that would require some level of cooperation between both parties, even after there's agreement. Let me give you an example. You know, we've heard this happen, and I've seen it where we have issues about access to property because of concerns of the people living there, and they may be at a high risk, so they don't want exposure to COVID-19, so they may not allow an appraiser to get in timely. And now that backs up then the financing contingency, and that might back up the closing date. And we need everybody to come back together and agree to be somewhat flexible so that we could succeed in this transaction. In a win-win scenario, you'll typically get everyone working together for that cause. In a win-win negotiation where it ends in a win-lose, where there's one clear winner and one clear losing party, the minute something comes up that would ask for or need some level of cooperation or some flexibility, the losing party will typically say, I want out. You know, in the book Shift, which is 12 tactics for a shifting market, the number 12 strategy or tactic there is how to bulletproof your transactions. If I negotiate a deal and it's a win-lose, where there's clearly a winner and clearly a loser, I'm not bulletproofing my transaction. In fact, I'm probably setting myself up for failure. So what does it look like? What does a win-win look like? Well, a win-win is one that's integrative. So we're working together for a common cause. It's to get agreement. Win-lose is combative. It's, you know, clearly I'm going to be the victor when I feel like I've slayed the other side. A win-win is collaborative. A win-lose is one-sided. Win-win is positive. Win-lose is adversarial. Now let's talk about these first kind of three categories. So integrative, collaborative, and positive. You know, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Darren, wait a minute. You know, in a negotiation, it is about it's about putting the needs of my client first and foremost, right? I go, yes, it is. Well, then how can I be collaborative, integrative, and positive and still make sure their needs are met? I believe it can be done. It doesn't say you're tipping your hand and you're giving all the information away. It's saying that we're going to work together to try to get to this goal, which is agreement. The flip side of that is the three words in the win-lose column, right? Combative, one-sided, adversarial. Now, I know in your market, because they exist in almost every market, there are agents who believe that's the best way to be in a negotiation. We're going to advocate that that's not, because, again, if you get to the end and it feels like it was a win-lose, the losing party is going to find the first opportunity to get out. And then you're not succeeding for anybody. Here's the next one under win-win. It's trusting. Win-lose is non-communicative. That's another one right now, especially in this time of so much uncertainty. When someone becomes non-communicative, it drives people crazy. That level of uncertainty puts people off balance. So it's kind of a side note, but I want to have this as a takeaway. You've got to really do probably even more communication than ever with everybody involved in a negotiation so that you can keep things moving forward. Now, when I say communicate, it's not just a one-sided thing like texting. I see that abused, and I see that really as a failure in a negotiation quite often. Once in a while, a text is a good tactic in negotiation, but it's not the way you probably should negotiate from beginning to end. Win-win is respectful. Win-lose is demanding. Win-win is explorative. Win-lose is ego-driven. Now, ego-driven, let me talk about that for a moment. That's, you know, unfortunately in our industry, there's this idea that, you know, you've got to have this strong ego and, like, you know, you're the best that there is and no one's better. And I think a lot of the past marketing and ideas that came up through that had us believe that that's what this is all about. In a negotiation, when I say ego-driven is a win-lose, if the other negotiator is really strong on ego, meaning that they've got to be the smartest person in the room, they got to let you know that all the time too, I actually believe I've got a pretty good opportunity to do really good for my client, because I like to be dumb like a fox. Now, what do you mean by that, Darren? Well, it was a phrase I learned years ago, and it was to say, you know, you don't have to come across like you know everything. In fact, in a negotiation, sometimes acting like you don't know gets you a lot of information that's helpful to get to the desired outcome. You know, I'm taking right now, I'm using this time of COVID to sharpen my skills. I'm doing a master class with an author named Chris Voss, who wrote a book called Never Split the Difference. And over the weekend, I was going through a couple of the lessons, and he talked about that. And he taught some techniques about how you can get more information by acting dumb like a fox. And so that's really ego drive is I got to be the smartest, I'm the best, you don't know anything. Ego drive, I've heard negotiators say this. They sense that the other agent might be newer, and they'll bully them by saying things, well, never in my 18 years in this business have I ever seen this. That's all ego. That drives us, that actually ends up typically being a win-lose. Sharing is a win-win. Competitive is a win-lose. Solutions-oriented is a win-win, and then divisive is a win-lose. Now, if you look at these two columns, there's just a couple things that I always want to think is a takeaway. If I had to wake up every morning as a real estate agent, great at what I do, and I had a choice between spending my time in the left column of win-win in how I work every day, or spending the right column in a win-lose, how I work every day, which one would be more fun? Integrative, collaborative, positive, trusting, respectful, explorative, sharing, solutions-oriented. Or combative, one-sided, adversarial, non-communicative, demanding, ego-driven, competitive, divisive. So that alone, to me, just makes this like a easier path to take because it's going to be a lot more fun. Now, when I say, though, you look at those, you also can do the left side, the win-win, and still be a great advocate or a fiduciary for your client. You can be. It's just that it's the way you choose to manage, the way you're being with the other side that makes that happen. Now, I'm going to, in real estate, I always think that we think it's an easy thing about this idea of negotiation. And, if you look at it this way, before the negotiation, we've got a buyer who wants a house, and ideally they've got the ability to buy it. They've got a mortgage set up for money. You've got a seller who has a house, and they want to get paid some money. And in between, we've got what we'll call a gap. And that's a gap because there's no agreement yet on price, on conditions, and on terms. And then our job as the real estate professionals is to really close that gap. And when we've done that, then we've got a buyer who's happy because they've got the house that they wanted. We have a seller that's happy because they got the money that they desired for that. And in between, that gap is gone because it was a win-win for both. Now, this is a real simple diagram, but I really think it's powerful because this statement that I'm sharing with you next comes to us from a mega agent down near Boca Raton, Florida. And she said the gap is how agents stay employed. Love the gap and be thankful for every negotiation. That comes to us from Jackie Ellis. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, here's where I think as real estate professionals, we have great opportunity. I think as a general rule, most of us as real estate agents are lousy negotiators. We are. We want to get it done. We want to get to agreement. We want to move on to the next deal. And so then we don't learn the skill and the art of negotiations. And then we wonder why sellers are unwilling to pay us what we think we should earn. I think one of the biggest opportunities every one of us has in this industry right now is to get so skillful at negotiation that you demonstrate your value to your seller or your buyer every time there is a negotiation. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean by that is that it's not the path of least resistance. It's not the easy button. It's getting to the spot where we're doing what's best for our client and demonstrating to them that they made the right decision by hiring you to represent them. Now, on the seller side, that could be that you're negotiating to putting more dollars in their pocket because you're not allowing them to accept the easy offer. On the buyer side, it might be that you're so good at identifying properties that have opportunities that you're able to negotiate down to a lower sale price and better terms and conditions for your buyer so that you're helping them save money on that side. That's what I mean. And why I know that there's opportunity there is that the National Association of Realtors does a survey of home buyers and home sellers every year. And they ask, what is it that you found most valuable in your agent? So these are people who sold in that year. And every year, the percentage of sellers that said the negotiation skills of the agent is like 5 and 4%. It's so low it hardly makes the chart. Gosh, guys, there's opportunity in that. So get great at it. Now, if that's true, why is it so difficult? Well, because I think negotiation is really, it's a combination of mindset, skill set, and experience. So it's as much science as it is art. It's not one or the other. And most of us, because if we grew up in here in the U.S., our culture isn't one of a lot of negotiations. Now, there are some cultures in the world where it's a big part of their culture, and so they grow up that way. But for the most part, we really don't. I mean, if you think about it, what do we normally negotiate? We negotiate car buying and house buying. Do you negotiate much else, though? Now, you have kids, you negotiate with them every day, right? And yet they lose that too at some point because we squash it out of them. But as a culture, we really don't do it much. So this is a great opportunity, I think, to start getting better at it, because in doing so, you're going to start demonstrating stronger skills and demonstrating your value to your client. Let's talk about the three of these and how you can do that. Adopting a negotiating mindset, again, in this time of COVID-19, man, you've got to really work on this. And I don't know about any of you. I know where I'm at with that. And as much as I work in this every day from a mindset perspective, this is a tough slog. This last 4.5 months, with no certainty about when we're going to go back to whatever the now normal after that'll be, is tough. So you got to work on it. And I'll just tell you that. I mean, I that's just my opinion. But so first, it's got to be a win-win attitude. So when I go into a negotiation, I want to go in with this idea that it's going to be a win-win. I've got to have a healthy ego. And that, what I mean is, again, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I don't mind if they think I'm dumb, actually, because I'll typically get the information I need in doing so. I've got to be able to be committed yet not attached to the outcome. I had a sales trainer years ago I worked with who said this, and I love this phrase, so you may want to write this one down. He said, show up, tell the truth, don't be attached to the outcome. Show up, tell the truth, don't be attached to the outcome. And I think, in a negotiation, when as a negotiator, if I get attached to the outcome, I'm not going to do the best job possible for my client. What do I mean by that? Well, you know what? If this deal coming together and closing is going to be your only opportunity for a mortgage or a car payment in the month of September, you're attached to the outcome. Now, I'm not saying not being committed to your client. You got to be committed to them, yet when you get emotionally attached, then you start losing your power as a negotiator. And I'll tell you this, guys, because I've been there. In 31 years, I had a lot of years where I wasn't doing the right thing consistently, and I had deals that were the make or break for whatever I was doing in my life at that time. I get it. How do you avoid it? How do you avoid not being attached to outcomes? Make sure that you're lead generating and doing enough lead follow-up, that you've got enough in the pipeline coming behind this deal, that if this deal doesn't go together because of some reason that's really legitimate, it's not going to make or break me. So it's not me compromising my integrity because I've got to get the deal done. So that's about being committed and not attached. The fourth one is be professional, open-minded, and solutions-oriented. Here's the thing I always think about is the consumer wants solutions from us. We're the people who do this every day. The average homeowner has been in their home 9 to 10 years as of the surveys last year. It's been 9 to 10 years since they last did a real estate transaction. 30%, actually almost 33% of the market is first-time buyers. They've never bought or sold real estate in their lives. They need us to be professional and solutions-oriented for them because we do this every day. The other thing I'll talk about on professionals with the other negotiator, I believe, and this is just my opinion, that the more professional I can be with the other negotiator, the better job I do for my client. What do I mean by that? Well, if I could be not attached to the outcome, like the last point, and I can always speak professionally and with respect to the other negotiator, I'm doing my job. Where people who believe in a win-lose show up differently is they'll bully you as the other negotiator. They'll curse and swear. They'll blow up. They'll be emotionally just crazy. That is not professional. In fact, what I've learned to do is I'll say this to someone. Let's say the other negotiator's throwing a bunch of profanity at me. I'll just say, you know what? And this might be a phone call. When we can have a professional conversation, please call me back. I'm hanging up on you now. Click. None of us is doing our job for our other client when we're that emotionally worked up. And so I just let them cool off. Let them cool off. And then when they do call back, they'll typically apologize. Not always, but sometimes they will. And then we can do a better job for our clients. And that ties into this one, is the more patient, calm, and emotionally controlled you can be as a negotiator, the better job you'll do for your client. So if you see how these kind of work together, if I'm attached to the outcome and I don't believe that your professionalism looks like I just described, so I show up, I'm bullying the other negotiator, this is the only deal I've got going, so it's got to happen. There's no way I'm going to be patient, calm, and absolutely no way I'm going to be emotionally controlled. Now, here's a question for you. In a real estate transaction, is it fair to say that it's an emotional thing for a seller, yes or no? It is, isn't it? Yeah, because they've got memories, they've raised their families there. That's an emotional time. For a buyer, is it an emotional time? Absolutely, because maybe they found their dream home and it's a tight market where inventory is low and you've got a race to be the winner and all that other stuff. And and they envision themselves doing Christmas there or whatever. It's an emotional time for those two sides. It cannot be an emotional thing for you. In fact, I think about it this way. If I'm going to be the best that I can be for my client, the calmer I can stay during the whole thing, the better job I do. And I bring them solutions, I bring them options, but I don't take the emotion and convey it. What do I mean by that? Well, I always think about it this way. I'm kind of like the air filter. My client might be worked up, emotionally distressed. They're going to yell and scream and do whatever they do at me. That's fine. I'll take whatever the important parts of that were, filter it, and calmly deliver it to the other side. And in doing so, and being able to be that way, I'm going to get a better outcome for everybody. That's my job. I am the professional. Now, we have a bold law. I mentioned at the beginning that I was a bold coach. I am. I still work in that capacity for 10 years now. And our bold law that goes like this is keep your emotions between the lines. See, again, the more calm I can be, the more I can be the calming voice, the better job I'll do. I always think about it this way, and I hope this will never happen to any of you in this meeting today, but let's say you go in for your annual physical with your doctor, and they discovered something that looked a little suspicious, so they wanted you to have a biopsy done on it. And you did, and now you're back in the waiting room or in the exam room of your doctor's office, and your doctor walks in and they go, oh my God, I don't know how to tell you this. It's so distressing, so distraught. I can't. You'd be like, that's the last time I'm going to see this doc. Because no matter what the message is, that is not the way you want your doctor to deliver it, is it? So then why do real estate agents do something like that? We're professionals. By the way, we can earn at the same level that someone in the medical profession does, and yet we act differently at times. Keep your emotions between the lines. It's a powerful one. Please remember it. So that's kind of the art side, right? It's the mindset piece. Now, there is some science to it, some skills itself. Harvard Business School has a great negotiating course. In fact, you can take that now on Coursera for, I think it's free if you don't want the certification, and it's under $100 if you want to do the course online and really learn it. They've got over 100 negotiating tactics that they cover in that course, and I'm going to put a couple of them up on this word cloud. Now, what I want you to think about as you look at all these words is to say you don't have to understand the 100 or 200 negotiating tactics. You don't have to know them. You don't have to understand them. You have to know a fair amount of them, though, because the key is you want to recognize them when the other negotiator is using them in the negotiation, because then you can do a counter tactic. What I did here, though, is in this word cloud, the bigger words are probably the more commonly used ones. Flinching. Flinching, one of my favorites, actually. Now, if a flinch, how I'll use it, and by the way, I'll say this, normally I'm very positive in everything I do. In a negotiation, there's one time I'll be negative, and that's if there's a need to do it for what will be better for my client, and a flinch kind of does that. So let's say you presented the offer to me face-to-face. I know that rarely happens anymore, but let's say you did, and you gave me the offer. I'm the listing agent, and I see the terms and conditions, and I go, oh. Now, I'm over dramatic in it right now because I'm doing it in a digital world, yet you get the idea. What's the power of a flinch? Well, it puts the other side pretty off balance. So that's flinching. Now, on the phone, you can do it too, right? So, you're going to present the offer to me, you're describing your terms and conditions, and I'm going to go, oh, ooh, ah, ah. Those are versions of flinching. Again, the purpose is to put the other negotiator a little off balance. Silence. Whew, that's the second one, probably the most powerful negotiating technique you can ever master as a real estate agent, because most of us can never master it because we never attempt to. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take it out of the context of a buyer and a seller. How about on a listing consultation? Let's say you took the listing and you're now like 3 weeks in. and you still don't have any offers yet. And so your seller and you are talking, and the seller says something like this. I go, well, Darren, do you think we need to drop our price? And I'll say, you know what? I think the market's telling us that's probably our next move. So my question for you is this, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Do you want to do the normal price reduction, which is 5%, or the drastic one, which is 10%? And this is where silence shows up. Once you say that, you do this. Now that was about 5 seconds, and some of you got really uncomfortable. We get uncomfortable in silence, yet you need that piece of silence to really do the heavy lifting for you. You know, I don't know any other way to say this or a better way. I learned this years ago from a trainer I worked with. They said, whoever speaks first loses. Now, in that context, whoever speaks first loses would only happen if I spoke first. Because if I get uncomfortable in the silence, I'll jump in and I'll say, why don't we just drop it like $1,000 and see what happens? Because you're so uncomfortable in silence. Here's the thing you have to remember with a seller and a price reduction. When you have to do a 5 or a 10% price reduction because the market's dictating that, and by the way, that is the truth, their whole world just shifted. They've got to think about all their financial plans now because they just had 5 or 10% disappear of what they thought they would have. Let them run the math in their head. Let them decide. More times than not, you're going to get a much better price drop when they speak next than you would if you make a suggestion, because a lot of us are so uncomfortable in that. So let that happen in a negotiation. Same way, the more silent you are at times, strategically, the better the outcomes typically will be for you. So master that one. Walking away, there's better offers. Nibbling is one I mentioned early on that, in some cultures, negotiation is just part of everyday life. And it's a big part of everyday life. Nibbling is one of those techniques that comes out of a lot of cultures where it is common, where, after there's an agreement made, they may come back and ask for just something a little bit more, and then just something a little bit more, and then just something a little bit more, just nibble away. And I see this happen too often is that unskilled negotiators who don't understand what nibbling is will get upset, and they'll let their client get upset about a nibble. It's like, no, it's just part of the negotiation. It's culturally, in many cases, it's just part of that culture. Don't get upset about it. You give options. No is always an answer to a nibble. Right? And yet I see people get all worked up, and I'm like, it's part of it. Flinching, nibbling, hot potato, red herring, easy acceptance, feel, felt, found. There's well over 100. Here's the key. Get familiar with the tactics so that you can recognize them. You don't have to master them. You probably need to master 5 or 6 at the most for you, that work for you. Here's a couple of easy acceptance. The market of the moment. If your listing inventory is low and it's a road race to get an offer accepted for a buyer that you might represent, easy acceptance is a great tactic. You draft the offer so good that there's absolutely no reason why that seller should even want to counter it. Now, you're like, this is a negotiating course. Why would you do that? Because in that market, that's what is needed to be successful for this buyer. And none of us think that way. And I'm like, that is it. That is it. So it's from the beginning of the buyer consultation, we set that expectation. We make it so easy. Now, if we're able to draft an offer that's that good, then I'm going to give you one other technique. And this comes to us out of Canada. They call it a bully offer. And in the many markets up there where it's been super hot, like some of us have right now, and it's been that way for 10 years, where a house hits the market at $400,000 and it sells for $700,000, which is those are the numbers you see like in Toronto and Vancouver. This becomes a powerful one. You draft the offer so good that there's really no reason to counter it. And then you might even put in the offer that acceptance of this offer is upon presentation. Meaning, Mr. Mrs. Seller, here's the offer. This is if you don't accept it right now, it's going away. It's going away. And we call those bully offers. Now that works when it's such a great offer that and so it puts the seller in that gambler seat, right? And they're like, oh, well, there might be others. There may not be another one this good. You really, if we don't accept it, it's going away. Well, that's what they've told us, because they said if you don't accept it upon presentation, it's gone. So key to that, you've got to be in the easy acceptance piece. Now, feel, felt, found's another great one right now too, because Sometimes you'll get buyers, if you don't do the expectation setting correctly from the beginning, you'll find a property that really fits most of the boxes that they said they wanted, and you're going to draft the offer, and it's listed at $250, and they're like, well, we want to offer $230 because no one ever pays full price for a house, do they? And so I found in that negotiation, I'll say, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I understand how you feel. In fact, I've had a number of buyers in this market who came in thinking that that's the way to be successful at acquiring a property in our market right now. And yet what I've found is that's not true. In fact, you'll find yourself being beat out time and time again if we don't strategize this differently. Just a side note for everybody, I've seen in the last 3 years for the first time in my career what I heard deemed as buyer fatigue. And buyer fatigue is where you get beat out on offers so often, you finally get beat up and you go sign like a 3-year lease because you're like, I never want to go through this process again. And then as the agent, you just lost that opportunity completely. It happens if we don't manage this correctly. Trade-off principle, trading off one thing for another. Takeaways, throw it in. Here's not a negotiating tactic, and I gave you a little glimpse of it earlier. Not a negotiating tactic is splitting the difference. Splitting the difference. And I see agents do it all the time. To me, that's a sign of a weak agent. Let me say that again. Splitting the difference is a sign of a weak agent. What do I mean by that? Well, you might be going, well, Darren, you said our job is to get buyers and sellers together and have it be a win-win. Yes, that is correct. I believe, though, you can do that without splitting the difference. Now, what does it take to be great at that? It takes knowing the market you're doing your business in at a super high level. Let me give you an example of where I see this in a negotiation. It's when you get within like a window of probably getting an agreement on a transaction. And let's use, for sake of example, that it's the price. So let's say the house was listed at $250. The buyer did come in at $230. It was the only offer you had. You're the listing agent. You go back and forth a few times. Your seller comes down a little bit, buyer comes up a little bit. And let's say the buyer's now at $241. And your seller's last counter was at $246. Right? So we're $5,000 apart, aren't we? $5,000. And a weak agent at that moment, because it's $5,000, would say, well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you just split the difference, I bet we could get an agreement. And that's what agents do. That's the easy button. That's not demonstrating your value, quite frankly. Because let's say in this example, that the house really is worth $245 is the lowest it should ever sell for. And you're asking them to drop below that to $230, what would that be, $233.5 or $243.5. See, you're asking them to give up too much. So what if your seller came back and said, okay, I will do what do you think? And I'll say, well, based on the market, I don't think you should go any lower than $245. We're early on market. We've got strong activity. Interest rates are still holding low. All the reasons why I think they should hold their ground. And give a little, $240. So I'd say come back at $245, and I believe we can get them up. And that's not splitting the difference. Do you see that? To me, that's where we give up when we don't demonstrate our value. Now, you have to know the market. You have to know the market. And you have to know the market of the moment. In a strong seller's market, sellers can make really high demands, and buyers will live into that. If the market shifts or balances out, that changes. So just know that happens too. Don't do that. Now, I mentioned splitting the difference. Amanda put in the chat box. Yes, I agree. Probably one of the best books on negotiating written in our times. Written about 4 years ago by Chris Voss. The vivid thing about that book is he was a hostage negotiator for the FBI. And that was his job. And he said, when we split the difference, someone died. So that's the thing that sticks into my head around that as well. So just know that. Now, a couple other things in the skill or the science part of negotiations. Number one, you got to know the wins of all parties. Remember, I said a negotiation is a conversation or a goal between all parties involved, each with their own individual needs, wants, and aims. So you've got to know the wins for all parties. Your wins versus their wins, right? So our side versus their. Roadblocks. Here's the one time I go to negatives. When I strategize on a negotiation, I'm going, okay, what are the things that could go wrong? So what could come up and stop us from getting to success on this? And I think about the roadblocks in advance. This comes, it was a technique learned from studying the ancient Stoics of Greece and Rome, but they said that was when you study the roadblocks in advance, then when the roadblocks do show up, if they do, you're more prepared to manage them. And that's one of the few times I let myself go to negatives in any course of a transaction. Figure out what the little wins are for the other side and know what yours are. This is a powerful one in the market of the moment. You know, I'm amazed at how many agents working with buyers in a really high demand seller's market, right? Because we're getting 10 to 15 offers in a lot of our properties still to this day. How many of those agents that brought those offers in never called us and asked what was important to our client? If there's nothing else you take away from our conversation today, that's the one thing I would tell you. Pick up the phone, get in a conversation with the listing agent if you have a buyer that wants to make an offer on a property, and ask, what's the most important thing about this sale for your seller? Now, you know, most agents will say, well, of course, it's price. Well, yes, I mean, I assume I know that, but what about closing date? What about possession? What about the swing set in the backyard? What about, you know, you find out all of the things that might be part, because in doing so, you could craft the offer in a way that makes it the one that's easy to accept. Because know that most of the agents in your market don't make those calls and don't have those conversations. No minimums, like with your seller, like what's the lowest price you would absolutely accept, Mr. Mrs. Seller? There's an acronym for that called a BATNA, which is the best alternative to a negotiated price, a BATNA. And as their agent, they're my client. You know, I've confidentiality is what I have to hold. They can tell me that, and from that, then I can strategize our negotiation, because I don't want to end at their bottom, like the lowest they would ever accept. I want to end higher than that for them, but I need to know what that is. So ask. You know, there's a great quote that comes to us from a psychologist. He said this: place a higher priority on discovering what a win looks like for the other person. That is a great negotiating skill and technique. Find out what it would take. You're going to succeed more times than not when you know that first. And then ask the other agent what would make this a win for them. Because make no mistake, there are agents who try to time their closings based on when they've got bills due. And if it's okay with your client and they could give that, because by the way, that would certainly help in your offer being the one brought forth to get accepted, if it can make the mark for that other agent. Well, no, I'm not saying that's the right thing for that agent to operate under, yet they do. So just understand that, know what that is. A couple other things, perfect your listening and questioning skills. You know, I know this is going to date me, but there was a TV show back in the 70s called Columbo. And I think it was on NBC, and Columbo was he was a detective. And he was known for people just thinking he wasn't very smart. And he asked a lot of questions, but he did it in a way that was dumb like a fox. And he would be questioning the suspect and and he'd just shake his head and he'd go, okay. And he'd turn away like he was going to walk away. And then he'd turn back and he'd go, oh, just one more question. And it was always in that one more question that he would typically solve the crime, because he exacerbated the other party so much. You're like, let's get rid of this guy. Nothing wrong with that. By the way, it's a great technique. Get great at questions. Lots of questions. And then really listen to what the answers are. That's how you discover what the wins might look like. And we say listen purposefully. That is being there because I'm there to listen for what could help put my client in a stronger position so that we get to agreement. That's the purposeful listening. And then the last one is, and this is so powerful and so needed, and I see it missed so often, set expectations. Set expectations in the market of the moment with buyers. Oh my gosh, you've got to do that. With sellers, you have to as well. And then you also have to set expectations with the other agent. You've got to do that at the front end of the negotiation. Now, there was a phrase I learned a number of years ago, and it was so powerful, I actually typed it up in big font. I taped it right to right here to the right of my desk. I have a whiteboard. So it was there as a visual cue for me because I'm a visual learner. And it was this script, and you may want to write it down. It's only 6 or 7 words. And I say this: never hang up the phone without saying this. Here's the script, and here's what's going to happen next. And here's what's going to happen next. Here's what's going to happen next. Mr. Seller, here's what's going to happen next. Here's what's going to happen next. Never hang up the phone without saying that, no matter who it is you're talking to. I guarantee when you start doing that, your reviews from your clients will go up. Your transaction closing percentages will go up, because people feel more comfortable, especially in this time of COVID-19 when they know what they can expect. Because we live in a world of so much uncertainty right now. If you can be that one piece of certainty, they're going to love you. They're going to love you. Now we also have a bold law that goes like this: people will grow into the conversations you create around them. And I took that bold law because I'm like, oh, this is brilliant, because they do it. And let's say I'm working with the buyer and I see we find a property that I know is going to be a good fit for them, and I'm pretty certain they're going to want to make an offer. And then I look on the MLS data sheet and I see the name of the listing agent, and I'm like, oh no. Yeah, you guys don't have any agents like that in your market, do you? You know, it's like, oh, this is gonna, oh. Now, hopefully that's not you, and it won't be. It shouldn't be, and yet we have them, don't we? So I took this bold law. People grow into the conversation you create around them. I'm like, okay, well, let's do this. Let's experiment with this. So I say this to that agent when I see it's that agent, and we did draft the offer. I'll say this: I'm so excited to be presenting this offer to you. I've only heard great things about how fantastic you are at getting deals together. Now, I'll tell you what, only once have I had an agent, after saying that script to them, go, I don't know what you've heard, I'm a jerk. Otherwise, they kind of live into what you just said. People will grow into the conversations you create around them. So I'm so excited to be presenting this offer to you. I've heard only great things about how awesome you are at putting deals together. Now, you can change it up a little bit based on what you've heard about them, or maybe you've worked with them before and you want to make sure it goes good and you can fix some things from last time. These scripts really work. Lastly, around this skill set, here's the big mistake I see as well. All of us, no matter how big our cities are, we work in small markets, meaning you're going to have deals with the same agent again and again if they do any level of business than you do. So I always think about it this way. I can be a bulldog in a negotiation. I really am, in a nice way. I work to follow that win-win column. And at the end of the day, whether the deal comes together or not, when that's done, we can be friends. And I'm very clear about separating the two. I've got a short cartoon I want to show with you quickly because I think this demonstrates it really well. It's a Looney Tunes about the wolf and the sheepdog. Let's take a look.
I punched you in, Sam.
Well, gee, thanks a lot, Ralph. Shaw. Well, better luck next time, Ralph.
Oh, sure. You can't win them all, you know. Thanks. Nice day, Sam?
Yep, good to be alive, Ralph.
Remember that, please. That's going to take you much further in your career, where we can be just like Ralph and I forget their names now. Ralph is the sheepdog. Anyway, we recognize that in the end of the negotiation, it's over, and we can have mutual respect for each other. I see too often where agents hang on to things, and it really wasn't the other agent. It was their client who might have been kind of crazy and really difficult, and yet we let that become the label we put on the other agent. Don't do that. Your markets are small. Oh, yeah, Wiley. Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, our markets are too small. I'll tell you what, you go a long way in doing a better job for your clients when you can make friends with the other agents that you do deals with. Let me give you an example. We're in our 4th year of a really tight seller inventory market. In fact, below 400,000, it's a road race. It really is in almost every case. I've had it happen a handful of times over the last couple of years where we'll get to the closing table and the other agent will say, and we represented the buyer, so we were one of the 15 competing offers, where the other agent will say, You weren't the best offer, yet I shared with my seller that you guys do such a great job through the whole transaction and getting us to closing that I really encouraged them to work with yours. See, that's one of the best compliments that we can get because it tells us we are succeeding for our clients because of how we're choosing to be. That's a big deal. And at least in my mind it is. So just remember that. Lastly, here's a big mistake we make. We think it's all about price, right? That the whole deal is all about price. Now, price is a piece of the puzzle. I make no mistake about that. There's a lot more to it, though. Let's talk about some terms, right? Closing costs, closing date, lease back. We've got in our market with such tight inventory, our sellers can ask all kinds of crazy things. And for most mortgage lending, the buyer could close on the property and lease it up to 60 days without it interfering with the agreements in their mortgage docs. So we've had sellers say, okay, we want to close on September 1st and we will give possession to you on November 1st. And buyers agree to it. Buyers agree to it. And what does that do? Well, a lot of our sellers the reason they're hesitant to put their home on the market is they don't want to end up homeless. What that does is it buys us 60 days of time to go out and not make offers subject to sale because those don't work in this market either right now. And you can do that. Now, not every buyer will be amenable to it. Not every seller will need that, yet just know that that's one of the options you might have. Earnest money and option fees. Earnest money, by golly, I see this happen. People come in with offers that they say are really great, and the earnest money is like $1,000 on a $200,000, $300,000 house. I'm like, that's nothing. That's not earnest money. Earnest money in my mind is so much that it'd be painful to lose it. That's why it's called earnest. They'll stay in the deal. They'll honor their agreements. Virtual showings and offers before viewings. This is a technique that's working right now in the time of COVID, especially if I've got a seller that is in a high-risk category with COVID. They don't want 50 people traipsing through their house. No matter how much we can do to disinfect it, there's still a risk that someone could be asymptomatic and could infect them. Again, now this is a market of the moment item, but we've got such a tight seller inventory market. We've done this where we've said the house is hitting the market on Saturday. We're going to do virtual open houses. There'll be no physical viewings. In fact, there'll be no physical viewings at all. Draft all offers. And in the offer, we'll give them the language to say, if this offer is accepted, the buyer has 3 days from the date of acceptance to schedule and perform a physical walkthrough. After the physical walkthrough, they could call the deal off or they could stay in the deal. And what that's done then is we just took all of these people that would be coming through that seller's house that might be in high risk and eliminated that. We go out and do amazing virtual photography, all kinds of stuff so that we've got good visual aids. And then we bring the offers in and we accept one and there's not been a single walkthrough of the property. And then once we've accepted it, then we let them come through and it's only one party versus all the people before. So again, just something you might offer a seller that might feel that the only reason they don't want to sell right now is because of that. Conveyance, none of us like the bill of sale items, yet that can be a term. It could be a deal changer too. That zero radius turning lawnmower and you've got 2 acres of land that the seller's selling with the house and the seller's going to a condo, they're not going to need it. Maybe that becomes a negotiable piece. Home warranties, inspections, repairs. Again, all of these are the terms that could make or break whether your offer is the one that gets accepted. Find out what's important to the other party with regard to those. Because a lot of times you can structure the offer in a way that'll put your offer above others and get you towards acceptance. And then the couple quick truths, and then we're going to wrap this up. Number one, the first truth, the better the offer, the better the chance of it getting accepted. That's where setting expectations with the buyer becomes so crucial. I think, if you're working with a buyer and you won't do a buyer consultation, you're just wasting your time. You got to start there. You got to start there, especially the market of the moment. And then the other thing is you really want to be mindful of not going back and forth and counter offers more than 4. Because what our research has shown us is that when we get to 4 or more, the chances of getting the closing drop or diminish greatly because people lose interest when there's too much of that. It's an emotional toll it takes. People lose interest. They're not as excited as there was before when they went in, and chances of getting it closed aren't as strong. So we want to offer great advice to our clients. We want to be strong negotiators. You can do all of that, have great terms and conditions, and I believe you could accomplish that in fewer than 4 counters. So here's what we talked about. Adopt a win-win mindset, right? Go into the negotiation thinking that this is going to be a win-win. Your greatest value proposition could be improving your negotiating skills. This is where you earn your money. If I can demonstrate that I'm putting more money in the pocket of my sellers or I'm saving money for the buyers I represent, that's my value proposition, or at least a big piece of it. Know the tactics. Practice a few and counter tactics so that you know when they're being used on you by the other negotiator. Stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. Here's what I always think about. The more I can be like this during a whole negotiation, like just nothing gets me worked up at all, the better job I can do for my client. And then finally, you got to over communicate. If there's ever a time when you need to do that, it's today. There's so much uncertainty for people. They're off balance. They just feel uneasy. The better you can be as a communicator, the better they're going to love working with you this time and the times thereafter, and refer other people to you. Now, I touched a little bit on seller listings. I'm going to take just a moment. I want you to just bear with me because I want to make an invitation to you about a program called Bold Pivot that starts tomorrow, actually. So the timing is perfect of this. So I love that Amanda asked me to do this morning for you. Bold Pivot is a digital delivered program that starts tomorrow and runs through the month of August. It's 4 days a week for one session a day, 4 days a week for 4 weeks. It's anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours, depending on what session it is, and it's all being recorded, so you can hop in and watch it even after the fact if you couldn't be there. Here's the key, though. It talks about mindset. We spend a fair amount of time with that each and every day we're together. We're going to talk about our command database for my Keller Williams agents with us. We're going to dive a little deeper into some of the cool things in command that'll save you time right now. For our non-Keller Williams people, we'll talk about it from a database perspective, whether you're using Top Producer, My Agent, any of those other things. Scripts and dialogues for the market of the moment. We're going to talk about social media as well and train some great social media by people who are succeeding at it right now. This is a course that's developed as we move because we want to make sure we're delivering best practices for the market of the moment. We talk about how you doubled out on leads and lead generation, lead follow-up, and then this is the big one. The focus is all about seller listings for the month of August. In fact, our goal in the 5,000 to 10,000 people who take the class is that every agent individually will take one seller listing while they're in this course in the month of August. That's the focus on seller listings. So here's the thing: if you find that seller listings are something that would be helpful in hitting your goals for your business this year, and you're not hitting it, I would say consider this. Now, how do we know this works? Well, what we know is we did Bold Pivot for the very first time in May. And in May, we delivered it to about 42,000 people. It was a huge group. And here's what we did. We're able to track within our back-end system the productivity of the agents who were in the course in the month of May versus those who weren't in our company, right? So average contacts created, added to the database. 46% more names are added to the database of the agents in Bold Pivot in May than those who weren't. 39% more opportunities created. That's that pipeline I was talking about earlier. 39% more of those were happening for the people there. Smart plans created. That's the leverage tool where it's kind of a set it and forget it, let it run and help nurture leads for you. 79% more of those. Campaigns created. That's the lead generation piece. We do using the dashboard for Facebook predominantly. We had 133% more campaigns going from the group in Bold Pivot. Here's where I think the rubber meets the road. Average contracts written, a 9% increase in contracts written, and then a 14% increase in listings taken than those who didn't. Now that's not not your socks off number. It's a real number though. And here's the thing I'll tell you: 14% more listings taken in May meant that those agents typically saw a 14% bump up in their revenue probably in June or July, because 45 to 60 days to see that take off. That's during that pandemic. In fact, that was in really the second full month of it where there was so much uncertainty. We expect those numbers to keep growing as we move into this and we get a little more used to some of the stuff we have to do now. That's the opportunity in front of you with Bold Pivot. Now, what's it look like? Starts tomorrow for 4 weeks. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have what's called a live classroom. And so it's a lecture really more than anything with great content. And we're bringing in cameos, appearances by agents really rocking whatever the topic is. So these are people in the field doing it. That they're going to share what they're doing. They're introduce it to you on Tuesdays and Thursdays, And then on Wednesdays, we have what we call Coaching Corner from 1 to 2 Central Time every Wednesday and Friday. And we're going to have that agent in the field with coaches there to answer questions that you ask questions, dive deeper, learn more, share scripts and dialogues, get even better at what they're doing. It's delivered digitally in a Facebook group, and it seemed to work really well. Investment's just $99 for that. Now, let me ask you this. If you had to invest $99 and a couple hours a day, 4 days a week to grow your listing business during this time, would that be money well spent? I think on one listing sold, your return on investment would be pretty large. So the course, you can still get in. We still have time. If you go to kw-.com, that's just the easiest URL to go register. And from that, $99, put your credit card in there. You'll get a printout of what to do next. We'll get you all set up. We start tomorrow at 1 o'clock in a Facebook group. And all you have to do is go to Facebook, and that's all there for you. So I'm just going to ask if there's any questions, and I'm going to stop the sharing so I can just see if you've... So anybody have any questions about anything I've covered at all? Pivot course or any of the negotiation content?